Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Have I got a very tragic and yet very terrifying experience to share with you today. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? All right, folks, have I got an absolutely just terrifying and tragic experience to share. Comes to us from an area that I am not familiar with at all, an area that I've never heard of. Campeche, Mexico. That is a kind of Mexican state located in the Yucatan Peninsula, just south of Yucatan. And many of you know who have been with this channel for a while, I don't use Facebook. I don't use Messenger. I have it. I don't use it. I had been a member of some groups, and I was a member of one group that is no longer on Facebook anymore. And I noticed, along with a couple other people, that it seemed that there was some kind of infiltration going on. And that made me really leery. And then when the news came out that the government uses or monitors Facebook and Messenger, I was like, nah, no thanks. Even though Gmail is, just as accessible, I feel more comfortable with basic Gmail to communicate. Then I will steer you somewhere else if we need to, speak privately. I have a phone that I will use that is strictly no Wi-Fi connect. It's a phone number that I put minutes on once a month. When I use it, I turn it off. So 2017 is when this experience happened, and I'm going through my Messenger, and I needed to check on a subscriber who is sick, and I wanted to see if they were okay. And I noticed that there was a recent friend request and message acceptance or whatever, and it was like a couple of days ago. So I just clicked on it really quick. I don't know why I did, because normally I don't go on Messenger. I do, and it's a gentleman, and his name is Yuri, and I shot him a message. I accepted his friendship. I read his quick message for request, and I shot him a message and said, listen, I don't like Messenger. Email me. We'll talk via email. And so about, a couple hours later, I'm checking my emails and going through some stuff, and he emails me immediately. And by the way, Mike, I did get your email today. I will be reaching out to you within the next couple of days. So Yuri emails me immediately, and he said, I live in Campeche, Mexico, and I am a Mennonite. And I was like, wait, what? This is kind of weird. So I click on his Facebook quick, and sure enough, he's Caucasian Mennonite. He's blonde hair, blue eyes. His kids are blonde hair, right in Mexico. I had no idea that there is a large population of Mennonite in Mexico, Central America, and South America. Blew me away. Like, we're talking 700,000, I think, or something like that. Like, a lot of people. So I quick ask him, how are you communicating with me if you're a Mennonite? And then I looked through his Facebook, and I'm like, oh, he really is. Holy shit. So I said, listen, I'm looking at your Facebook right now. I don't know if I can, do you have a cell phone? I don't know if I can connect with you via, my cell phone plan, but let's try it. Do you have a cell phone? Can I get in touch with you? And he just so happens to have a cell phone. Now, he's got a cell phone, and it is, it's actually, his area code is from the United States, because he has family that, lives in the United States still, part of his, congregation, I guess you'd call it, family congregation, family members and fellow Mennonites. I'm not really familiar with the whole Mennonite thing. I know it's similar to Amish, just a lot less strict. And I didn't ask him, because we had a whole bunch of different stuff to talk about. Now, we end up connecting, and long story short, we end up connecting. So Yuri is 42 years old. He has 3 kids, a wife, and they've lived in Mexico pretty much since Yuri was a kid. He does travel back and forth to visit family members and a Mennonite church that is in a different state. I'm leaving that undisclosed because of everything that's going on kind of right now with just, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, like I don't want to get him in trouble he's an American, but I think he has dual citizenship. I believe that he said that. But I'm not really sure. So he goes back and forth, not all the time, but he's lived for something like 30 something years in Campeche, Mexico. His mom and dad are still alive. They still have a home in Campeche. His sister, so there's a Mennonite community. There's a large Mennonite community all throughout Mexico. And I said, so what's the deal? What's going on in Mexico? And I start to look at the surrounding area of it, and Campeche, it looks like kind of like a city. It's right on the Gulf. It looks really nice, but once again, we are talking about a third world country where the cartel and the government aren't really, things aren't on the up and up, So he and I start talking, and in 2017, this experience happened. Now, he lives off of an area, 180, heading north toward the Yucatan. So he's out of the city of Campeche. And of course, growing up in the area, he's heard of, Chupacabra, what is it? El Cuetlacas, which would be the Bigfoot, and I probably butchered that. And Hombre Lobo, Dogman, now, or werewolf. Now, there's a lot of legend and a lot of talk through, the communities. And his family, he and his family are pretty tech savvy. They have a TV, they have a computer, they have a they have a smartphone. They're, I guess, pretty liberal, I guess it would be. There's just certain things that they don't do to honor the old customs. And apparently, the further south you go, there are some Mennonite that literally live like you and I, that, he's got electricity, he's got, so he's pretty in touch with the world. YouTube, obviously, and such, Facebook. So he's heard of all of these legends and all of these strange creatures. And his dad used to talk about the chupacabra, and which I asked him, I said, well, I believe in my own research that North America has like this canine chupacabra, which really looks like to me, looks like a thylacine that is very, sick, emaciated, and, with mange, because those jaws open like a thylacine. And Forrest Gallant, he talks about the North American chupacabra quite possibly being a thylacine, because there had been a boat in like 1930s or whatever that crashed in North Carolina with a breeding pair of thylacine. Apologize for that, Tigger. The channel mascot needed to get let out. So Forrest Gallant, he is a biologist, and his lineage, his mom and I believe his grandfather were all biologists as well. He's an adventurer. He likes to find extinct or possibly endangered species and kind of bring them to the forefront of our eyes so we can help save them. Now, he has found some cool stuff, but he really believes that the thylacine, the North American chupacabra, is or was this breeding pair of thylacine that bred. So back to Yuri. Yuri's dad actually believes that he had seen the reptilian-like thylacine. It's a shorter, kind of reptilian-like creature, humanoid, meaning like arms, legs, but shorter tail with spikes going down its back. Usually what I believe, anything that I've ever read, green color to its skin. And that would be the Central and South American chupacabra. Puerto Rico, I believe, believes in that as well. Dominican Republic, I know, does. So, and it's the goat sucker. Now, apparently, Yuri's family are doing okay financially. They own a bakery, and it's a line of his parents started this bakery, and that's where his dad used to deliver baked goods. And apparently going up towards Yucatan, he had seen this strange creature come running out of the jungle and go across the street. And it looked what they call the chupacabra in that area. And it just shot across the street in front of him. He'd never seen it again after, and he's never seen anything that looked like it since then either. So he's always heard that story of, the chupacabra in the jungles. There is, things that we don't know about in these jungles. And he had been looking into some things. The reason why he contacted me was because he was looking for Bigfoot and Dogman related experiences in the Amish and Mennonite community. And I have two Amish people that reached out to me, one in New York, that had some crazy experiences. Actually, the person in New York was not Amish. It was his neighbor that shared that. Now, in 2017, Yuri and his wife and kids, he had 2 kids at that time, were, working and living the Mennonite way. Just very comfortable in their life. It was a very routine, basically, a little different than what we do up here, but pretty similar. It's pretty interesting. I always thought that they were kind of like a little more advanced than the Amish, but definitely not like what we do, but he's got a computer, he's got a TV. So he's got a set of neighbors that live pretty close to him. The property that he lives on, his grandparents had owned. His parents were in America when he was born. His grandparents were down in Campeche, and they had bought this large kind of tract of land. And what their idea or their thing was is they were going to have Mennonite families kind of build their houses on this property and work together and have their church in the village or city of Campeche. But just kind of like a self-sufficient community of Mennonites, but different families, not all the same family, but living together. So Yuri has this, he's got his property, and this couple had been living next to Yuri for a couple years. The father's name was Joshua, and the mother's name was Emma. And they had 2 kids, 2 sons, Samuel and Jacob. Now, they were living there, and Yuri knew of them. Apparently, Yuri's wife was fairly good friends with Emma, or, associates. But Yuri, being the child to take over his father and mother's business, the bakery, he's pretty much working and doing what his dad did when he was younger. So he actually still brings bread to other areas in this part of the peninsula. It's very interesting. And so he's not, he knew of him, he had met him a couple times, but they're not like best buds, they're neighbors, but, they're not playing horseshoes together and drinking beers like we do in America with our neighbors or whatnot, or have a neighbor war. They just knew, he knew of them. And his wife was very fond of his wife, Emma. Now, apparently, sometime in 2017, there had been a rash of sightings, people seeing things and seeing what they thought were people looking into their homes. In this Mennonite area of this property that Yuri's grandparents had bought and built. So you've got, a few people complaining about seeing what they thought was a person looking into their home, random kind of noises on their outside of their walls and such. And it started to ramp up a little bit, and at first they thought that it may be like kids from the city of Campeche, just being kids, or drunk men, whatever. But the Mennonite community and the Mexican community, there is no kind of conflict. There's literally, they live side by side. They work, together. They exist. They coexist with any kind of, they live in pretty harmonious. And so it was kind of like, thought maybe it's kids, and then it starts to ramp up. And one lady had claimed that she had seen these red eyes staring at her through her windows. And of course, you have red eyes, you have religious people, very religious people, and they immediately think demons. So that's the next step, the next kind of evolution in this experience that happens to this small community. And there are other Mennonite families that live in and around this area in Campeche. But this is like a land, a bunch of acreage. So you've got like 20 different houses, all on 1 to 3, ranging in 1 to 3 acres, maybe a little more, all, living in, once again, harmoniously. All as a community, not all family members. Now, of course, they start to immediately, a few are in fear, and then a few are like, oh, maybe she's just imagining that they were red eyes. Her, she's crazy, because now they are still thinking these are kids messing around, local kids just kind of dicking off and being kids. And then some damage starts happening. There's some property damage, some like claw marks are being found in some on sides of barns. Some horses had been found torn apart, decapitated. The strangest one was there was a donkey that it looked like it had been just literally, its body had been pulled and its head and spinal cord were located on one side and its body was located on the other, which is a tremendous amount of strength. And a human cannot do that, that's it, whoop, pulled it right out. It's, to me, I immediately, if I ever saw anything like that, my first thought would be, I would be leaning toward alien or, interdimensional something. They had no idea, they're kind of terrified. This isn't kids now. This is something completely different. And this is their, these are their animals. This is their livelihoods. Some people use donkeys to travel with, they'll, like Yuri's grandfather and dad and stuff, they would travel in a, kind of wagon pulled by donkeys or horses, so this is livelihood. Then it started to progress to getting a little more daring. People would start to find their dogs literally on their porches of their home, torn apart and not consumed. That was the thing. They started to think, well, maybe it's some sort of local wolf. The maned wolf, I think, is the largest wolf that is in existence in the Mexico region. Very seldom seen and very strange looking. But, they're trying to come up with these ideas of what this is, because now, it's ramped up to where, oh, it's kids. Oh, it was a demon. No, that lady's crazy. And now you're finding, decapitated animals, horses, donkeys, and shredded dogs. It's not like in the United States to where, all right, guys, let's call the local sheriff or the state police. No, this is Mexico, and there is police presence, but it's not like how it is here. They did report it, but there wasn't, it was kind of like, whatever. And at that point, even though the Mexican community and the Mennonite community do live pretty good together, is when the police were notified, and it kind of got brushed off, that's your business. You handle your business. That has nothing to do with us. So that kind of set everything in motion of, we are on our own. We need to figure out what's going on, because it's progressively getting worse. When is it going to be a human? And then it stops. It stops. And then a couple of months later, it's quiet for a couple months. Just no attacks, no sightings of eyes looking in, nothing. And all of a sudden, one day, Yuri is at his father and mother's shop, and his wife walks in and says to Yuri, Joshua and Emma's oldest son is missing. Samuel is missing, and he hasn't been seen apparently since last night. And so now, he's like, well, maybe he ran away. Maybe he met a girl. All this kind of, maybe he just, Mennonite community wasn't for him. I don't know him. Yuri's like, I don't know him. I know of him, but, and his wife is like, no. He's very committed to his family. He would never run away. He's very loyal to his family, his mom, dad, and his brother, because it was the four of them. And so they are now aware of this young man gone missing. And a couple of days go by, and they wait a couple of days. The family, the mother and father, wait a couple of days, and then they notify law enforcement. And some law enforcement come out and they, make a display of being there. And they talk to a few people, and maybe he ran away. Chances are he ran away. He's probably in the city. Who knows? Yuri at this point makes a statement to his wife and says, how well do we know these people? What if, the son is, how we don't know them well enough. What if the son is, he's 17 years old. What if he met somebody in the city and is now working with the cartel, transporting stuff for them? And his wife immediately is like, no, and just dismisses it. Just really, no, that's not who these people are. And that was immediately what started to go around the little community. Maybe he is. And sure enough, in small communities, the mom and dad, Joshua and Emma, hear it. And they're hurt, but they're upset too. They're kind of like, hey, you know us, or of us, in Yuri's case, he didn't know a lot of the people. He was constantly working, and when he got home and did stuff, he did it with his family. He wasn't very communal, I guess would be the best word. He just very inward to himself and his business and his wife and kids. But there's now a little bit of like, well, maybe it wasn't, we should kind of give him a break, yada, yada. And they end up, like 2 or 3 days after the police come out, the police show up and said, we found a body, we found a Caucasian teenager, and he was found on 180 heading into the city, but there's, jungle all around this area. We have him. Can you come and identify him? And they do. They're warned, hey, prior to, we have to tell you that it's not good. It looks like he had been attacked by a wild animal. The family go and identify him, and he was attacked. Law enforcement immediately say, we think it was a jaguar, because of the large claw marks, the bite marks, and there's little to no consumption. So we think that, he was just attacked by a jaguar. Maybe a mother jaguar with cubs or kittens or whatever they're called. But nonetheless, that's what we think he was attacked by. And, that's what we're gonna list this as. It's strange because immediately when Yuri told me that, it was so dismissive of the local police. I thought about the Christopher Whiteley case, where Lipin, Texas, one branch of the government said, well, the sheriff's department said he was attacked by a mountain lion, and Department of Environmental Conservation states no, he was not attacked by a mountain lion. We don't know. We can't identify these wounds. Immediately, that's what I thought about. I was like, damn. And of course, there's not a lot of effort put into it's wrapped up right there, That's what we think, and that's how we're gonna label this, and it is unfortunate, because I think that if this happened in America, that at least there would have been a little better of an investigation. It would have been covered up, sure as shit, but maybe not. I look at Christopher Whiteley, Amber Miller, Tony Aarons, Brenda Hamilton, Dr. Nancy Shaw. So probably not. And so they now are talking about how there is this jaguar, and then some people start saying, hey, maybe that's what the lady saw, and maybe that's what was peeking in people's windows, tearing apart our animals and this and that. And immediately everyone in the community is kind of on edge. There's a jaguar lurking around, and a few of the older Mennonite men in the community, Yuri's dad and a few of his friends, start to say, no, definitely not. A jaguar would not, have the power to do what happened to that donkey. It most certainly would not go onto someone's porch and attack their dogs. It just wouldn't be so brave and brazen to do something like that. And the father, Joshua, starts to talk about how it looked like these claw marks were far apart. They didn't look like how a cat's paw would look. You know, he said it was very spread out and almost looked like, you know, fingers, if they were spread out and just thrashed on something. So everything is just really kind of going bizarre and berserk. You know, nobody's trusting anybody, and everybody's very leery of everything. So at this point, the community kind of starts to not shun, but pull away from the family, Joshua and Emma, and their remaining child, Jacob. And I guess his wife, Yuri's wife, still talked to Emma, you know, because they were friends. And she had said something like, how would his body be all the way to where it was found? He wouldn't have run away. He wouldn't have walked that night, first of all. He was, you know, something must have happened to him here. And whatever happened to him, if it was that jaguar, would have had to have dragged him all that way. How could it be so strong? How could, you know, without waking anyone up? And why would he be outside? Why would he go outside? And that's when the son, Jacob, kind of says that he had gone outside one night he heard the dog outside growling, and he had gone outside to bring the dog inside secretly. Like, these dogs stayed outside in this community, and he didn't want their family dog to get hurt, so he had gone outside. And Jacob had been awake when he had gone outside, but he must have fallen asleep during that period of time, because when he woke up the next morning, his brother Samuel was gone. So now you have, okay, well, he was just going to let the dog in, and something took him from our porch or our yard. And they're now really, really terrified. They're not letting their other son kind of anywhere. He's stuck inside the house. And all one night, Yuri is on his way home, and he's pulling into his driveway, kind of not a car driveway, but they use a buggy. He actually still uses a buggy, which is crazy because he's got a cell phone and he's got electricity, but whatever. So he's pulling into his home, and he thought he saw a large shadow kind of go between his house and the house on the opposite side of him. And there's a large white kind of fence, not a picket fence, but a large wood, not pallet wood, but almost like clapboard wood, just a big, large fence. And almost like you'd see in a corral, made out of what would it be, 1x8s, something like that. And so he just sees this kind of shadow, And he's kind of like, huh, what's that? He puts his horses into his barn, checks on everything, kind of does his routine at night, and goes inside. He's sitting, relaxing, talking to his wife about the day and planning on his routine for tomorrow. He's got to tomorrow go into Yucatan. He's got to go into there and for some deliveries and such. And he was going to bring his eldest son. And his wife was kind of, is he old enough to do that with you yet? And, he's something like 15, 16 at the time. Yeah, he's perfect. Let's, get him introduced to the family business now. He's the right age. And they hear just this loud scream, just this ungodly, terrifying scream. And they kind of just immediately are quiet. They just really, and him and his wife are looking at each other like, what was that? Because they're in their house, they're having a conversation. And it came from this community somewhere, but it was, this shriek of terror that's so loud that their sons and daughter came running down the stairs, because they have 2 kids, 2 sons and 1 daughter. They came running downstairs thinking that it was their mom. That's how loud it was. Yuri looks at his wife and says, stay inside. I want to go and see. He goes out onto his back porch and he's kind of waiting to hear any kind of scream, a noise, and see where it came from. And he hears people talking. And one of his neighbors that he grew up with yells to him, "Hey, are you okay? Yuri, are you okay? Is your wife okay? What was that noise?" And he responds, "I don't know." And then you hear this kind of a male kind of grunt and a loud, not a scream, but almost a wail, like a sad cry, but just super loud, like like if someone comes upon what Joshua came upon, his family dead. All the men from the 2 guys that are walking up to Yuri's, all 3 start running towards where that noise, that wail came from. And they get to Joshua's house. And Joshua is standing in the yard. And they can see shadows. They can see, it's dark. But you can see Joshua's shadow. And what's, going on. It's not bright, it's dark, but there's still lights and stuff. And they yell to Joshua, "Are you okay?" And he turns to look at them and he says, my family is dead. My family is dead. It killed my family." And they run over, and his wife is just, it's unimaginable what this thing did to her. It almost resembled what Amber Miller, her arms were like. Put it this way, if a human got ragdolled by something that has claws and sharp teeth, that's what this poor woman looked like. Just literally her arms, legs just kind of hanging, her torso ripped open. Just a really horrific sight. And then they look at Joshua. One of the men grabs him and says, come with us. And Yuri looks at Joshua and says, "Where's your son? Where's Jacob? Where's your son?" And he points, and there's a kind of grouping of trees. And he said, "I saw it dragging that way." And he looks at him and he says, "What it? The jaguar? The jaguar?" And he shakes his head. He shakes his head and he says, No, it was the hombre lobos." And he's like, "Werewolf?" Like in disbelief. "Werewolf?" And he's put off. He's scared. Like you literally see a woman torn apart, and he tells you that I just saw a werewolf take my son in this grouping of trees, set off in the darkest part of the yard. And one of the other guys says, "Yuri, wait. And he runs to his house, and he comes back, a couple minutes later, and he's got a shotgun with him, and he hands Yuri a rifle. Yuri doesn't know the caliber of the rifle, but it's a rifle nonetheless. And, "Do you know how to shoot this?" "Yes." He said, "All right, let's go over." And they walk over to this grouping of trees. They're very quiet. They're looking kind of at the ground, looking around just to see, half expecting it to come from like behind some trees or something. And his friend walks in. Yuri's right behind him. And he stops and he turns and he looks up, his friend, and he looks up, and the boy is dangling from the tree. He's almost stretched. Yuri said that it looked almost like his body had been, almost like if you had pulled a slinky too far. And he said there was, obviously skin was torn. His insides were on the outside. And he didn't say slinky. He said spring-like toy, and it just stretched. And hanging from this couple of branches, he was kind of like, almost like it tried to climb the tree with him or whatever. And he had gotten caught up in the branches or something. The kid's legs had gotten caught up in the branches, and he just kept pulling. And so they get him down, and they bring him over to the house. As they're walking, they're carrying this poor kid. He's, they're holding him as best as they can together. And they hear this growl probably 30 feet from behind them in that grouping of trees that they were just in. And Yuri turns and looks because they can hear it. And he immediately, guys both just see these just red glowing eyes staring at them. And it's just, growling. You can hear the growl and you can see the eyes, and they're about a little shorter in height than Yuri and this man standing. So it's a very large, because it was standing quadruped, very large Dogman. The thing that Yuri said, he said, I wished to God that we could have done something different at that moment. But the fear had overwhelmed both of us and our desire to live. and we dropped the boy. He was already dead, but they dropped him, and they ran away from this. They both had a shotgun and a rifle, but and they get to about where the porch would be, and they turn around, and they watched this thing just run up and grab the body, and it took off. It looked like it had got him. It got the legs first, because as it ran back, and they watched it. They could see the eyes as it ran. It ran past that section of trees, and they saw something tumble, and it was the upper part of the torso. They ran a minute after they had watched this thing run away. They ran and grabbed it, the torso, and brought it back. And so then the whole village or community is just in hysterics right now. The father is just, you cannot calm him down. He just witnessed this whole traumatic everything. His whole family, he loses his son 2 days prior. That was at his own home, and now his wife and his youngest son. So he's inconsolable. He's just a wreck. And they kind of figure out, what are we going to do? They contact Yuri's dad. Yuri's dad gets an elder, and they wrap the bodies and do their traditional remembrance and stuff. But there was a lot of blood. There's a lot of gore. So it was much different than someone passing away in their home. So the elders and a few of the women, the elder women, come in and take care of all of the remains in their proper way. And like I said, it's not like someone passing away in their bed or someone being sick or old. That's what this community is used to. They still hadn't brought in their son from the police station back yet to remember him, because they had, for some reason, had kept that. Even though there was no investigation, they immediately called it, the Jaguar had done it. The next morning, law enforcement comes out and talks to the father, Joshua, talks to a few of the locals, and Yuri is, once again, he's doing his job. He's going up to the Yucatan area to deliver bread and stuff and baked goods and stuff. That's what his family does. It's just how he supports his family. So he cannot be there that day. But his wife, everyone had gotten kind of questioned that had been there. And they had said, this is what we saw. And the one guy that was with Yuri that witnessed the dragging of this poor boy, as it ran away, the police ended up saying that you were mistaken, that they ended up accusing the father of working with Los Zetas, and that he must have been smuggling drugs for them, that their son had been attacked by, a jaguar, but that must have been, you must have did something to upset the Los Zetas, and they came for retaliation, and what everyone saw, what Yuri and Joshua and those two other men saw was a human. Their brain played a trick on them, nonetheless, knowing full well that these men are, not in the cartel or working with the cartel. Apparently some have and some still do, and they get in big trouble for it when they get caught. But it's not something that they're going to do, and it's definitely not what Joshua was doing. So they immediately bring him to the police station and question him for nearly an entire day, right after, his whole family had been wiped out. And they just, that's how that read out in the local newspapers and articles and such, that Mennonite family massacred by Los Zetas, another cartel death and such, and wrote it off. Now, what Yuri's wife saw when she had given Yuri's statement, because Yuri never gave a statement because he was gone, and they never came back to even ask. But when she said what her husband had seen, the police officer that interviewed her and talked to her, his eyes said everything she needed to know, that they were well aware of these creatures running around through this area, that it was nothing new to law enforcement, but they have to keep the rest of the public quiet, sane and safe and stuff. So let's just lie like our government does. And that's so a day later, whatever, Joshua gets help from this community, and he ends up burying his family in a traditional cemetery. And shortly there, he moves back to the United States. Yuri's never heard from him. He didn't expect to, apparently one of the other Mennonite locals has, but he's never going to come back to this area. He's officially just, how do you go back to a normal life once that happened to him? You don't, So, like 6 or 7 days later, there's a knock at Yuri's door. And it's the other Mennonite. And he says, someone shot that thing. Someone shot it. And it's not dead, but we shot it and we know where it is. Do you want to come help us? Yuri kind of, not his normal kind of jump up to the game and let's do it, but because of what he witnessed, he immediately said yes, because now he's thinking about his daughter. He said, I said yes because what if my daughter, what if my 2 sons, what if my wife is next? Of course I want to help. Of course I do. And this is not something from God. This is something from the devil. This is pure evil. So they go they head towards the city, towards where Joshua's other son had been attacked. And there's a couple of Mennonite men, and 2 of these guys they had a truck, like a beat up old kind of pickup truck. And 2 of these guys are standing in the back of the truck, and they've got a flashlight spotted in this tree, and periodically you would see a glint of red eyes and like a loud growl. They start to shoot into the trees at it. It jumps down out of the tree, lands on the hood of the truck. You got two of the men that are sitting in the bed of the truck. Yuri and this other guy are sitting on the side, not sitting, but standing on the side as it lands in front of all four of these men. And it lets out this just roar, just this tremendous. Yuri said, I felt it. He said, I felt it in my chest. He said it, and I felt just the instant I heard that roar, he said, I felt just this extreme kind of sadness and depression and terror all in one. He said this roar was just traumatic. It was just this fucking loud but painful. And he said it. He said, I felt depression, but I felt afraid too. And it jumped as it roared. It jumped and landed quadruped on the other side of the truck and started to run towards the Gulf. There's a large tract of land, but it's not running. It had run across 180 and started to run into the jungle going that way. And the two guys that are on the bed of the truck, they just took a couple shots at it. Yuri and his buddy are kind of frozen. He's in shock at what he felt. He just felt this. He said, it was a sadness and a depression feeling that I had never felt. He said, I never felt anything so haunting that, he said, I felt so bad for Joshua. He said, but that feeling that creature, when it roared like that, he said, I will never forget how I felt. It was almost like when it roared, it shot this energy into us, because they all felt something different, but they all did feel like an overwhelming sadness. It proceeded to run into this jungle. And since that day, there had been periodic sightings of it, walking along like wood lines of this kind of little area of community. And it is jungle lines, you've got jungle all around you, but it'd be walking along, but it would never come into the community again. Yuri will not allow any of his kids, this is 8 years ago. His kids were, now they're almost adults, all of them, but at that point, he said, my kids were mad because they had forgotten about that night years later. And I still wouldn't, let them go anywhere alone or unaccompanied. Even though, if I was walking with them or bringing them somewhere or playing with them, that I wouldn't have been able to. If it wanted to, it could have gotten all four of us, like it did that family. Since then, it's just been periodic sightings of it, but nothing as of major. And as time went on, it got less and less. And he said, I always wondered if anyone, Mennonite or Amish, had ever heard of anything, or had an experience like that. And he's heard a few other Amish experiences, Bigfoot ones mainly. But he wanted to, see how and what these people did to overcome all of that fear and sadness that had arrived from this experience. And that's when he started to go on YouTube and look and on Google and type it in. And he came across my channel. He'd been listening to, I think it's A&E or whatever, Discovery with Destination Unknown. Josh Gates talks about it. He listened to that. Listen to other, not community like me, Dark Waters, How to Hunt, Bitcondiff, not anything like what we are sharing, but kind of like that mainstream media, I guess you'd say, cryptid, which I don't trust, and then he sure enough found those two and asked, how both of them sounded when they shared. And I said, well, on the first one in New York, no, he didn't. I never spoke with him. And, I said, I might be able to put you in touch with the other fella. And he said, if you could, I'd love that. It's interesting to talk to him too, because he, even living in Mexico for 30 something years, he had this almost like a German dialect to his tone and stuff. Very old world Dutch, really nice guy though. Really nice guy. And just a tragic experience. I could never imagine, how Joshua dealt with that. It's just, your whole family just got wiped out in a safe community and then law enforcement blames you and says, you work with this, you work with the cartel. It's unbelievable. It's fucking sad is what it is. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share that with the ones you love and care about, and it may just save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless you all.